Coming up on Talking Points, the Supreme Court ruling in former President Donald Trump's favor, putting him back on the ballot in Colorado. How this could impact the former president's re-election bid.
And Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is stepping down from GOP leadership, who may replace him next.
Plus, a new set of congressional maps for New York State approved. How the new lines will impact this fall's elections. All that and more. Talking Points starts right now.
In a unanimous decision, the Supreme Court has tossed out a Colorado ruling that banned Donald Trump from appearing on the state's primary ballot. Good evening and welcome into Talking Points. I'm Benjamin Schiller.
And I'm Olivia Maniscalco. Colorado tried to remove him 3 months ago, citing a provision in the Constitution relating to people who engage in an insurrection. Now, it's Super Tuesday tomorrow, we bring in Talking Points analyst Luke Welch to tell us how this outcome could impact the former president's chances.
Olivia, good evening. With a jam-packed primary schedule on the horizon, as you mentioned, appeal, delay, and legal loopholes seem to be the words of the year so far for former President Donald Trump. The former president has a handful of legal troubles in all different stages laid out in front of him. Earlier today, the Supreme Court decided in a case that we've been following for weeks now, the court holding that states themselves do not hold the power to exclude a federal candidate like Trump from a primary ballot. Last month, the Colorado Supreme Court cited Trump's involvement in the January 6th insurrection as to why he would be booted from the upcoming primary. With many other states following suit and waiting out the decision from the Centennial State, Trump was thankful for the seeming legal win from him and his campaign.
I want to start by thanking the Supreme Court for its unanimous decision today. It was a very important decision. We're very well crafted, and I think it will go a long way toward bringing our country together, which our country needs.
Now, this wasn't the only victory that came for Trump recently from the Supreme Court, however. The start of Trump's January 6th insurrection trial, that reminder was supposed to begin today, is now being delayed until the highest court can decide if Trump's presidential status bars him from criminal prosecution. The conservative supermajority-led Supreme Court has 3 months to decide their two options of whether or not Trump can be tried for inciting an insurrection. Arguments for this case will begin on April 22nd. This month is one of the busiest for the primary campaign trail, with Super Tuesday tomorrow and 4 more primary elections following that. But Trump will have to add another date to his schedule when 3 weeks from today, his hush money trial involving adult film actress Stormy Daniels will commence. Trump's trial regarding his withholding classified documents in his Mar-a-Lago home is set for early May. Also, his election interference trial in Fulton County, Georgia is also in limbo, as his defense counsel arguing Fani Willis's relationship with the prosecution is causing a delay until early August. Olivia and Ben.
So Luke, let's actually talk about what the justices said in today's ruling. How did they get to a unanimous decision?
Well, yeah, that unanimous decision was a surprising one, with even the 3 liberal justices on the court ruling in favor of Trump, that it should not be up to the state legislature and governor to decide who can hold the executive office of the presidency and up to the voters. They were leaving it up to Congress now to pass a bill to allow states to bar Trump from the ballot, which would be unlikely to pass a Republican-controlled House. However, the female justices of the court, including the 3 liberal justices, as well as Amy Coney Barrett, seemingly band together against the male justices whose opinion made it extremely difficult for a federal insurrectionist ban to occur at all. Coney Barrett and the liberal justices saying that their colleagues, quote, took it too far, and that while this isn't the responsibility of the states, it's somebody's responsibility, and the breadth of the opinion seemed to restrict that ability altogether. These disagreements could lead to a messy situation when it comes to possible recounts if the election gets protested, like President Biden suggested earlier today, if Trump were to lose the presidential candidacy. But it's honestly refreshing to see a take like this from Amy Coney Barrett, separating herself from the liberal justices with a concurring opinion, but also the conservative majority holding against them in a court decision that would seemingly provide the primary race on a platter for the former president. Now, that's all we have for now. We'll have continued updates about Trump legal woes on Talking Points here, but Olivia and Ben, I'll send it back to you guys.
Luke Welch, thank you. The end of an era on Capitol Hill. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is stepping down from leadership in November. This announcement sets up a high-stakes race for his successor, and with more on how this could play out is Talking Points analyst Alex Burstein. So Alex, McConnell became the top Republican in the Senate 17 years ago. Why step down now?
Yeah, there was no clear answer from the 82-year-old who will stay in the Senate until his term expires in 2027, but in a speech to the Senate last Wednesday, he pointed towards the next generation of Republican leaders.
But Father Time remains undefeated. I'm no longer the young man sitting in the back, hoping colleagues would remember my name. It's time for the next generation of leadership.
Oates said it was not related to McConnell's health, but McConnell did say that his wife Elaine's sister recently passing away did make him think about new things. McConnell leaves behind a complicated legacy, starting with the Supreme Court. He recently pushed ahead Republican nominees while stopping Democratic nominees to getting to the nation's highest courts. But in the last couple of years, he's had some clashes inside the party, most recently on national security and aid to Ukraine.
Now, in the days since McConnell's announcement, who has emerged as the minority leader frontrunners?
Yeah, so right now it's a race between three Johns. First off, there's John Cornyn, the Republican from Texas. He was the first to enter the race, and he's a very good fundraiser. He mentions trying to improve communication and transparency in the Senate. Second up, there's John Thune, a Republican from South Dakota, the current minority whip whose term expires this year. He has mentioned in the past trying to get to this spot. And finally, there's John Barrasso, the Republican from Wyoming. He's not said he's going to enter the race, but he's the number 3 current GOP in the Senate, and you can imagine he will try to move up to either the number 2 or the number 1 spot in the coming months.
The three Johns. How, aside from those three names, who else should we look out for?
Yeah, so there's two names that have come up in the last couple of days. The first off being Steve Daines, a Republican from Montana. He currently serves as the National Republican Senatorial Committee chair. So if there's a big November for Republicans in the Senate, you can expect him to get a boost in possible polls for this. And then in addition to that, former President Donald Trump has encouraged him to get into this race. Then there's Rick Scott, the Republican from Florida, who represents the further right faction of the Republican Party. He tried last year to unseat McConnell for this role, failed. And then one person who is not going to enter the race is Lindsey Graham. He said he's not interested.
All right, now what are some key issues that whoever the next Republican leaders are will have to face?
Yeah, there's a couple of big things that the Republican Party is battling right now, and this leader will have to face. The first off, just uniting the party. There's some extreme factions right now in trying to unite the Republicans on their one ideology. And then national security is a big one. Former President Donald Trump has signaled possibly leaving NATO and has been hesitant on aid to Ukraine, and then also just looking at immigration and how to respond to January 6th, all things to keep in mind for the next Republican leader.
Alex Burstein, thank you. Battle for the border. Biden has a challenge for his predecessor, what he wants Trump to do after the break.
I don't think that many kids in my son's school even do it.
He makes fun of his friend who vapes.
He would never try it.
She's into soccer.
She's on the honor roll.
She's just not the type.
No way.
No way.
No way.
No way, my kid would never vape.
Get your head out of the cloud. Today, nearly 8,000 kids will start vaping, maybe even yours. Learn about the dangers at talkaboutvaping.org.
understand my predecessor's legal past today. So here's what I would say to Mr. Trump. Instead of playing politics with this issue, instead of telling members of Congress to block this legislation, join me, or I'll join you in telling the Congress to pass this bipartisan border security bill. We can do it together.
That was President Biden in Brownsville, Texas, Thursday, challenging his opponent, Donald Trump, to support the Senate's bipartisan border deal.
Now, both Trump and Biden visited the southern border at the same time, while new polls show immigration at the top of voter concerns. Our Luke Radel is following the border battle for us. Luke, will Trump be taking Biden up on that challenge?
Olivia, it's highly unlikely you'll be seeing Donald Trump sign on to the bipartisan border bill in the Senate anytime soon. Republicans have a fairly straightforward reason for that.
The president does not need new laws. The president needs a backbone to make sure that he enforces the immigration laws that are already on the books.
So, according to Texas Governor Greg Abbott and many Republicans like him, Joe Biden doesn't need the bipartisan border deal because he can easily solve the problem at the border himself as president, because the immigration laws are great.
The immigration laws are horrible. We're doing an incredible job. We're doing a record-breaking job, but we have bad laws. You know, when you have bad laws, you can do good, but you can do a lot better if you had good laws.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe we do need to make some changes to our immigration laws, and one good place to start might be with our asylum system. Very basically, it's the process that lets migrants make a legal claim that they are fleeing oppression in their home country and seeking refuge here in the United States, as President Trump sought to block asylum seekers from entering the country, a move that Biden promised on the campaign trail to reverse.
I would, in fact, make sure that we immediately surge to the border. All those people are seeking asylum. They deserve to be heard. That's who we are. We're a nation that says if you want to flee and you're fleeing oppression, you should come.
And they certainly did. Axios got their hands on government data showing more than 8 million asylum seekers and other migrants will be in the United States and in legal limbo by the end of September. So now that the surge has arrived, will President Biden keep his promise to help them seek asylum? Well, not quite. In fact, the Senate bill that he's been pushing for would significantly restrict who is eligible for asylum protection. And going even further, Biden is reportedly weighing an executive action that would deter migrants from making asylum claims on U.S. soil, which really upset this prominent Democrat.
The idea you can't even seek asylum on American soil? Can't even seek asylum on American soil? When did that happen?
Now, whether the president has changed his policy views or is just a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory is up for debate. But even though Joe Biden is running against Donald Trump in 2024, on this issue, he's also following in his footsteps. Literally. Guys?
Luke Radel, thank you. A decision at Alabama's Supreme Court has rocked presidential and congressional campaigns across the U.S. The court's decision created a new political nightmare for several Republicans as they rush to declare their support for fertility treatment. With more on how this ruling could impact campaigns on both sides is Talking Points analyst Ben Bascuk. Ben, good evening.
Thanks, guys. The Alabama Supreme Court stirred controversy with its February 16th ruling declaring that embryos conceived through in vitro fertilization, or IVF, should be legally considered children. The decision stems from a case involving 3 couples who underwent IVF treatment at an Alabama fertility clinic, where some of their embryos were destroyed, leading the couples to file lawsuits against the clinic and hospital for what they perceive as the wrongful death of their embryos. The case was brought to the state's highest court, which determined that the Alabama Wrongful Death of a Minor Act applies to unborn children, including those conceived through IVF. Several IVF clinics and the state's largest hospital have halted their services, concerned over potential legal issues faced by physicians and patients. In response to massive public outcry on both sides of the aisle, bipartisan legislation is in the works to shield those seeking treatment. Many heavy hitters in the GOP spoke out against the ruling. Let's take a listen.
Right?
Very recently.
Personally, I think it was a terrible ruling. I think the one thing folks should take from this is these are state issues now.
Are you comfortable with IVF as a procedure?
I am.
Yeah.
I'll just say I'm generally in favor of IVF.
With over 1.5 million frozen embryos across the United States, questions arise regarding their preservation and disposal. Looking ahead, the fate of this decision lies largely within the purview of the Alabama legislature, which may opt to address the ruling through legal means.
Now, considering this bipartisan response, is support for protecting IVF a universal feeling amongst Alabama Republicans, or are there still some who would agree with Chief Justice Tom Parker?
Yeah, guys, I have not heard a single Republican come out in support of the judicial opinion, not even former President Donald Trump, who's called on the Supreme Court of the United States to reverse the decision, saying he wants to make it easier for people to have babies, not harder. Alabama Governor Kay Ivey said she's eager to sign legislation to correct the issue, and Steve Marshall, the Alabama Attorney General, and another Republican said he won't prosecute families or providers who choose to use IVF.
Now, does the court's religious rhetoric regarding the decision go against the separation of church and state in this country?
Yeah, God was mentioned over 40 times in this decision in a 7-2 vote, where Parker came out with very extremist stances mentioning the images of God and other related issues.
And how does the recognition of IVF embryos as legal people in light of the Robbs and Roe Supreme Court decisions impact women that are seeking IVF in the state?
Yeah, women and providers and practitioners are scared and confused. The previous Alabama abortion ban explicitly excluded IVF, and now we see Washington representation reach Alabama with U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Javier Becerra. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
Healthcare rights. Roe would not have permitted this to occur. But the moment we broke that constitutional right to access for that care, the states were left to do as they wish.
Now, it's important to acknowledge that this decision on the state court is not binding to other state courts, but it could definitely invite the possibility of fetal personhood being applied to frozen embryos outside of Alabama. It's not every day we see Republicans and Democrats unite behind a single policy issue or a judicial decision, so it's something we're definitely going to keep an eye on going forward.
Thank you. France has become the first country to ensure abortion as a right in its constitution. The historic move comes in response to abortion debates in the United States. Members of France's parliament met this afternoon in a joint session at the Palace of Versailles. The measure was voted on and approved by a tally of 780 to 72. France had previously legalized abortion, but President Emmanuel Macron and others in the government sought to solidify the right with a constitution amendment.
In more news developing today, the Air National Guardsman accused of posting some of the United States' most top-secret reports has taken a plea deal. Jack Teixeira originally pleaded not guilty to 6 charges, claiming he willfully retained and transmitted national defense information. But as of today, Teixeira has pleaded guilty and accepted a 16-year sentence. The plea deal guarantees the Justice Department cannot charge Teixeira with additional Espionage Act violations. If he was found guilty, though, of all his charges, he could have faced over 60 years in prison. And coming up next on Talking Points, New York has updated its congressional map. Which districts are affected most? Next.
Come on, it's not that hard.
My big man fingers are having a problem with these little tiny buttons.
Whoa, watch it there. Your blood pressure's gonna go through the roof.
Tell me about it. I'm trying to learn how to get it down. Instead, it keeps going up.
High blood pressure can increase the risk for heart attack or stroke. Learn how to keep yours at a healthy range.
Ever hear a voice command? Just say text barbershop to 97779.
That's not what I said.
Just give me that. Now my blood pressure's up.
Welcome back into Talking Points. New York Democrats adopted a new congressional map last week. Now, they didn't get everything they wanted out of the redistricting attempt, but the redraw still gives them an advantage in some seats that could help determine control of the House this fall. With how these new lines will impact the House majority is Talking Points analyst Peter Barry. Peter?
Well, Olivia and Ben, Governor Kathy Hochul signed the new lines into law just last week here. So let's take a look at the old and the new lines here. So this is all of New York's 26 congressional districts. From the naked eye, it doesn't look like there's a lot of changes going on with the districts. And the New York Democrats wanted that after many legal challenges to this new map. They had to redraw it with an independent redistricting commission, and now it was turned over to the New York Democrats. But let's see which district it is affecting the most. It's going to be affecting our district, New York 22, which is represented by Republican Brandon Williams. So the most change they're doing here is they're taking out half of Oneida County here, which Williams took and ran with. He won by 62 to 38 in the 2022 general election cycle. But now they're starting to add Cortland and Auburn. Now it's a plus 10,000 registered Democrats. But let's turn to my home district of New York 3rd, which is represented by Democrat Tom Suozzi, who's riding high right off a special election. So they take out parts of Massapequa, which is a Republican stronghold, and are turning it to Republican New York 2nd District of Andrew Garbarino. And they're also adding Huntington and Cold Spring Harbor, which are all Democratic strongholds here. But let's see what this could potentially mean for New York going forward. So we could see a potential legal challenge from the state GOP, but it's pretty unlikely as it's very time-consuming and very costly. It will also start to take effect in June of 2024 during primary season, and the Dems could possibly take a majority within the House in November. But these lines will stay until 2030, and we will see new lines in 2032. Ben and Olivia, I'm going to send it back to you guys at the desk.
Very interesting, Peter Barry. Thank you. Yesterday, congressional lawmakers released the details of the first 6 budget bills needed to avoid a government shutdown. The 1,050-page document provides funding for the government's most important agencies.
With more on the details of this bill is Talking Points analyst Megan Acker. Megan, why is this package so significant?
Thank you, Olivia. President Biden signed legislation this past Friday, which prolonged government funding into this next week and extends the length of time Congress has to come to an agreement on the budget for the 2024 fiscal year. This is significant because it marks the 4th time a government shutdown has been averted since October, as budget legislation has increasingly been held hostage during partisan negotiations. The stopgap measure, intended to give Congress time to come to a consensus, requires legislation concerning 6 spending bills which passed by March 8th and an additional 6 bills to be passed by March 22nd. So if you take a look at the numbers here, Olivia, you can see that the package includes more than $450 billion in funding for the 2024 year. Now, Democrats claim the continued full funding of special food assistance programs, rent assistance, as well as pay for infrastructure employees, including air traffic controllers and railway inspectors. Meanwhile, House Republicans are trumpeting victories on veterans' gun ownership and funding cuts to agencies like the Environmental Protection Agency, the FBI, as well as the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives. Now, the consistent complications facing this budgeting legislation stem primarily from House Republicans maintaining support for, quote, policy riders, end quote. These are measures that prohibit federal funding in specific circumstances. House Republicans have placed an emphasis on anti-abortion and anti-gender affirming care policy riders. Additionally, concerns about border security have caused Republicans to demand more comprehensive funding to be allocated to tackling the issue. This stance puts House Speaker Mike Johnson in a difficult position as he fights to both maintain support from his hardline Republican constituents and work with Senate Democrats to successfully pass a budget. In the event that legislation continues to stall, Congress must pass these spending bills by April 30th, when a 1% across-the-board spending cut would be enacted on all government agencies. This is intended to encourage a timely consensus, but only time will tell. Back to you, Ben and Olivia.
Megan, thank you. Now, coming up on Talking Points, the expected general election rematch between Biden and Trump is roughly 8 months away, but the starting gun for the campaign will go off this week. What to expect on Super Tuesday after the break.
Your daughter just had her first breakup. Do you A, put yourself in her shoes? B, console her?
Don't worry, sweetie. This is gonna happen a lot.
Or C, find her a new boyfriend?
Nice single boys. That was weird.
As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
Jason, let's go see your room.
What do you think? We kept it a little spare, so you can decorate it how you like.
Dinner! Go?
Excellent. Soccer is fun. Yeah, I saw you guys out there.
Welcome back into Talking Points. 15 states and 1 territory will vote on Tuesday for Super Tuesday, with former President Donald Trump leading the force behind Republicans. How much will Super Tuesday actually matter for Republican voters? We're bringing in Talking Points analysts Andrea Oates and Ericka Love to tell us more. Andy, I'm going to turn to you first. The cycle seems to be like Trump is going to be the Republican nominee when we get to November, but does Nikki Haley actually have a chance tomorrow on Super Tuesday?
Well, Ben, like you mentioned, Super Tuesday definitely means a lot, especially to the presidential elections. Like you said, it is one of the larger presidential primaries that we have before, with 15 states and 1 American territory. So as of now, if Nikki Haley were able to win Michigan or South Carolina back in late February, then Super Tuesday would look a lot different, especially for her campaign. But because she wasn't successful in doing that, then it really does not have that much bearing. However, in more recent news, earlier today, she was able to successfully win the Washington, D.C. primary, which means a lot, especially because the Republican audience in the DC area is definitely seen as more of an educated and higher knowledge audience compared to other Republican states. So it definitely means a lot for her with that. Most of the states voting on Super Tuesday are also allowed to do so even if they're not already connected to a specific party. So there will be more areas for potential support as well for candidates in those as well.
Yeah, now Ericka, let's switch to the Democratic Party. Following Tuesday, Biden will give a State of the Union address on Thursday. Why is Thursday a springboard for his campaign?
It's a springboard mostly because he's going to try to do what every one of his predecessors did, talk about his first term accomplishments, right? You have the infrastructure bill and you have the Inflation Reduction Act, which are going to be his biggest points for the night. There's also the appeal to Georgia and Pennsylvania, which are great battleground states, and it's going to be the biggest battle of the whole year, frankly, because these states are wavering back and forth. It's never looked more purple than it does this year, and as Andy stated, there's so many issues on the tables, especially with what happened with the Supreme Court last summer with bills that weren't passed, and everybody's looking at this as a redo of 2020.
Let's talk about those issues actually that many voters are looking at when they get to the ballot box. The border issue is on many people's minds. Trump and Biden were at the border last Thursday, Andy.
Yes, definitely. Well, as we know, at the Mexican border, there have been definitely a lot of crossings happening, especially recently with, the whole kind of just disagreement really on the current Immigration Policy Act. President Biden was seen challenging Trump for the Senate immigration deal, and then Trump had already visited the southern border to kind of criticize the work that Biden has already done. So it's definitely up in the air, but there are other issues under this to definitely be mentioned as well, I feel like.
The thing is with all of that is with Biden and Trump, it's just really difficult because the issues are all over the place, especially with the Supreme Court.
Yeah, exactly. You know, there's many issues on the table. This is going to be something we're going to be looking at throughout the rest of the semester and next semester here on Talking Points. Thank you for joining us, Andrea and Ericka. That is unfortunately all the time we have for you tonight on this episode of Talking Points. Be sure to follow us on social media. I'm Olivia Maniscalco.
And I'm Benjamin Schiller. Have a great night, Syracuse.